Right. So, Andrew, first of all, hello. Pleasure to be speaking to you today.
Yeah, also a pleasure to be speaking to you. Thank you for having me. Very
No,
excited to talk about everything.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Super awesome. So, first of all, obviously, American Primeval, that is what you have landed, this huge role in Netflix series.
yeah.
Absolutely huge, right? Like,
Mhm.
I just first of all, obviously, want to say massive personal congrats, huge achievement.
Thanks.
So, obviously, huge amounts of security on Netflix's behalf, I'm sure, of what you're allowed to talk about and stuff.
Yeah.
But what can you actually tell us about the character you're playing? How do you feel about the role that you've been given? How do you feel about the character you've been given?
How do I feel? It was actually really interesting because originally, this character, when I auditioned for him, it was two scenes, one line apiece, very small character. And I submit this audition, don't hear anything back for like 2 months. And then at some point, my agent reaches out to me. Like, I forget about the audition because that's what we do as actors. We get a bunch of auditions, you kind of just throw them into the abyss. And like at some
Yeah.
point, you just have to forget about it. So I forgot about this audition. And next thing you know, I get like 2 months later, I get a text from my agent. And she's like, "Hey, Peter Berg wants to have like a one on one Zoom call with you." And I was like, okay, for what role? Because I did like audition for a few other roles in this project, but
Yeah.
very happy. So I asked my agent, like, hey, what's like, why does he want to have like a Zoom call with me when it's a character with like two lines and that's it? And then very quickly it became, it hit me that maybe this character became something else. We're like in these 2 months. And I go on the Zoom call with Pete and he's like basically telling me, yeah, this character has grew into something like totally more. I see you as it because I've watched your tapes, and like as soon as I watched your tapes, I just had so many ideas for the character. I totally
Wow.
wanted to recreate him. I have a brother in the show. His name's Virgil Cutter is the character's name, but he's played by Jai Courtney. And as soon as I got to set, I kind of just started being like a very annoying brother to him. And I just know like a lot of the producers, some like the writer Mark L. Smith saw it, Pete the director saw it, and I like to think that's the reason why the character even became more when I was out in like New Mexico and Santa Fe and Albuquerque. What was
Yeah,
the
because you
question?
really sank
Yeah,
into it there, I suppose, Not
yeah.
not method acting to a degree, but you could consider it that, I guess.
Oh no, definitely. Like I am, I do call myself a method actor. Like that's kind of what I've been training like for the past like maybe not the last year, but before that it was like I was in a Zoom class during the pandemic, and it was this great coach Dan Christensen that basically just showed me like a whole new side of acting. Because
Yeah.
up until then I was training. I don't know if you know like acting techniques or forms, but I was like in a lot of Meisner. I was doing like Meisner and repetition stuff, and
Oh, yeah.
it was good for like improv things, and I thought it was really cool for that sense. But I really like I grew up watching like I don't know Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Nicholson, Marlon Brando. These guys have a sense of the method in them, and I just knew like if I wanted to become like a character actor, like I've always wanted, that the method was the way I had to go at some point. And so we'll start talking about all of this, sharing it a little deeper later. But yeah, like it did go very like hand in hand with everything that happened in my life and like the character, just in how like the world in 1857, like in American Primeval, like where we're set in 1857 on the frontier, it's such a dark and chaotic world, and
Yeah.
it was just not an easy place to live in. Coming from like some of the stuff that happened in my life, transitioning over to the show, it was pretty easy to bring that stuff with me and to stay kind of in the darkness, I guess. Yeah, it was like very
Yeah.
freeing and all that. Yeah, and very cool.
On a similar note to what you just said there, obviously we were talking before we started recording about the passing of your father, and which again was very recent for you. I believe you said it was only 2 years ago, if I'm right.
Yeah, the 2 year anniversary was like October 13th, October 9th, one
Wow.
of the two. Yeah.
You mentioned he was very supportive of sort of your acting journey and going into this industry and stuff. I suppose, that in mind, how did that help you going into this show in particular? It's like, did that sort of give you any reassurance that, it would all go to plan? How did it impact this role
Yeah.
specifically?
It seemed a lot like kind of like God almost and everything and like fate to an extent because I've been in Austin. Like I'm from this place called Heartland, Michigan. I don't know if you've ever seen people do this. Like I'm from right here. People from Heartland, Michigan, we don't really, very small town, kind of like 5,000 people. Like nobody really goes to Hollywood and tries to become an actor ever. And I always
Yeah.
knew like at some point, like me and my dad growing up, we always watched movies. We watched Westerns. We watched so many World War II movies growing up and everything Marvel and Star Wars. Like I just grew up with that. Like 3 to 4 days a week, me and my dad were at like an 11 a.m. matinee showing at like the local movie theater down the street, just like always watching movies. So that's like
Yeah.
kind of where it started. But then I said, like, I grew up in a very small town. So like I would tell people maybe, hey, I want to be an actor. I want to do something in entertainment. And they would be like, all right, that's maybe not the smartest route for you to go. Maybe it's not the thing you want to do if you want to have a family and kids, which I do. But if you want all of this in the near future, like, and you want like the white picket fence and like the Victorian style house with the golden retriever, this is the you should not be going down that route. You should do something.
Yeah.
What I heard all the time was the medical. So I went to
Yeah. I
nursing
mean,
school.
especially given your circumstances, it's a risk. Yeah.
Yeah. So like a really, really just big risk. But I grew up with like a mom that's like a massive dreamer. And she would always tell me like dreams awaken, chances be taken, which is I'm pretty sure backwards how she says it. Like chances be taken, dreams awaken, but she always says it backwards. So I say it that way too. Uh, but she always told me growing up, like anything's possible if you truly believe in it. And my dad would like reassure me that was true too. But then my dad was the one that would taught me like the hard work ethic. And he's like, yeah, if you want these dreams, they're not easy. You have to work every single day at this. You have to put your best foot forward. And like he was very blunt with me. He was a dad. And like he would, I won't even repeat what he said, but he would say some like very things that like, yeah. He would basically just tell me like, you know, when I'd call him ranting about stuff, like when I moved to Austin, like shut up and just go work harder. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to your acting. Like if you can't get
Yep.
agents, like maybe yeah, there's some factors outside of your acting, but if you get that good, they can't ignore you. Is what he would tell me. Coming from your dad, that is like a big thing. I'm like a son, and you do believe it, and I believed it, and so I put my best foot forward every day. I would call him, and even if I was feeling like a little bit down, he would, you know, tell me to shut up and just keep working. Like shut up,
Yeah.
go do your serving job, go make your money. That's a means to an end, but then put that money right back into your career. And he would make sure
Yeah.
I'd be up at like 9, 10 a.m. every day, walk into a coffee shop so I can go read some scripts. Just a really big push, I guess, behind me. And so when he did pass, I kind of felt that push just go away for a little bit. And it was a really weird thing. I was really down, really sad. I was back in Michigan for 4 months, I want to say, just because I wanted to like make sure my mom was okay, my brother was okay. Like, I mean, hell, like I wasn't okay. Like I had to be there and I wanted to be there. All that happened, passing of my father. And it was 2 weeks after my father passed is when I submitted for American Primeval. I only had like 15 minutes left on the deadline for it too. So I just didn't want to do it. I had some people in my life that kind of reminded me the promises I made to my dad, not how I wouldn't give up. And like I told him that like I would make it at some point, like it was going to happen. And like he would respond back with like a very depressing I know because he knows it's going to happen, but he wasn't big. Like it made me get like all feely now. He knew that it was going to happen. He was wouldn't be able to see it. And that kind of hurt, but I know he's still seeing it. Like I know there's like something out there just because some things have happened and it's weird. But it was like a bit until I realized that like everything that my dad would say to me, he was doing it on purpose and he like, I don't know, kind of built it into me. And it just took me a little bit to realize that I had it inside me too. Like everything he would tell me, like I had that. I didn't need him to tell me that. And so I just kept on like 2 weeks after my dad passed, I just kept acting again. I told my agents like now's the time. Like I made my dad these promises. Like I really want to like stay true to my word because whenever I make a promise in my life, I really try to keep it to the highest extent. So
Yeah.
I started auditioning again, training a lot when I was back in Michigan. And some like bigger auditions started to come through and it was like starting to feel a little bit like, oh gosh, something might happen here. And then, like I said, like I like did all these auditions, sent them to the abyss, and then it was like the holidays, so the industry totally shut down. I don't hear anything at all. And I think it was like a week before Christmas is when I got the text. And it was like, yeah, like Peter Berg like loves your tapes and he wants to call with you and tell you some stuff.
Wow.
Pretty wild, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say as well, just like from my personal standpoint, it's a beautiful story, you know. It's like I think the fact that you've managed to take, you know, sort of this really, really tragic, unspeakably tragic event in your life, but remember the lessons that you've learned from it and put them towards something else and use that passion, use that sadness, use that energy and put it into something that, you know, you really care about. I think that takes an unbelievable amount of strength and integrity to be able to do. So again, like I just have so much respect for that. But you know, again, we've spoken about American Primeval, but
Yeah.
as I understand it, because not to seem creepy, but I've done my research. You're no spring chicken to this sort of industry because I believe you were in also a movie called Rent Free as well. That was your previous role.
Yeah, no, that was super funny too because I was shooting American Primeval, right? So I was on American
Also, it was
Primeval.
at
It
the
was like,
same time.
yeah, no, we had a strike. There's a
Oh
strike.
wow.
There's the actors and writers strike that happened. If you don't
Oh, of
remember, that
course.
was like
Yeah.
yeah, like a year ago, year and a half.
Yeah.
And that was like during the summer, and we were on day 96 of like 105, and we were like shooting some pretty big stuff, like with my character, like on the day. Like I remember I was in like my trailer, and I was like starting to get in the mood. I was starting to get in the mode. I had the music playing. I'm like starting to think the thoughts, and I get a bang on my door, and I go to like answer, and it's Pete, and he's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like we have to cancel." Like we have to cancel the day and like kind of postpone the shoot right now because we have picketers there right outside the reservation we're at. At this point, we just can't do it because we don't want to be scabs, all that stuff. Shut down the production, and it was perfect timing because like it was a buddy of mine actually. Like I worked with like years before, like a few years ago with. He's kind of like grown as a director, like a filmmaker. And he's kind of starting to like make a lot of cool stuff and like get a lot of recognition, which is really cool because I think he's like amazingly talented. And so my buddy, which his name is Fernando, yeah, I never say his last name, he's just Fernando to me. But he yeah, I remember I got back to Austin. I got a text from him. He's like, "Hey, there's this like rough like redneck role. I need you to like play. Do you think you can do it?" And he only sent me that text too because like the actor who's gonna play it kind of bailed out, and he just like needed
Right.
someone to fill in real quick, and it was like perfect timing because like I had the look. Like I had that big beard, I had my long hair. And the way like they made me look in Rent Free was very kind of like Austin liberal redneck, I want to
Right.
say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So it was like a little bit, yeah, there's a little bit more like I was wearing like a headband and stuff and had a little bit of like a hippie side to me. It was kind of just like perfect, just like come in for like a few days, shoot it real quick and pop back out. That was a very
Wow.
random thing that popped up and it is doing super well. Went to a Tribeca.
Oh, wow.
Funny story too, like this place Loro, like down the street in Austin. And the lead actor from that, whose name is David, I didn't know he worked there. And like we both showed up, like I got hired there because I just needed money to afford everything with
Yeah.
acting. Yeah. And so I start working there and we like are looking at each other for like the first few days, not saying anything. Like, do I know you from somewhere? Like maybe it was like maybe I've seen him like in Austin in the acting scene at some point. And then we like start talking at one point, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I just did this film Rent Free," and I was like, "I just did a film Rent Free too." And he was like, we stared at each other again. He was like, "Wait, you played Cody?" And I was like, "Yeah, you played Ben." And it was like this whole like whoa, because like he had like a full beard too and longer hair, and he was now all
Yeah, yeah.
trimmed up, looking good.
It's
I
just
also
it's
yeah,
wild to me you just didn't pick up on it straight away. The fact that it took a while is
it was because we
unreal.
looked so different. Like if you've seen the still from the show that like they released on from American Primeval, like I look leagues different
Oh
right
yeah,
now than I do.
I
Yeah,
saw yeah, yeah, no, that was wild. I again obviously I saw like the beard and stuff. Very outwards, you know.
yeah. I had some mean mutton chops going on for that. Yeah,
Gotta love it. No, that's crazy. It's funny actually. You mentioned, you know, the kind of character that Cody was, because I was going to my next question was actually going to be like, as far as when you're going for a role and when sort of something is offered to you or you go scouting out for something, what sort of characters are you most drawn to? You know, like what aspects do you look for in a character that makes you think I could probably fit that?
oh, most characters that I'm drawn to. I like I've been mentioning my dad. Like I mentioned, like growing up, like we watched Star Wars, Marvel, like World War II movies, westerns growing up. So like kind of anything that me and him like we're just fans of. Like I kind of gravitate towards that stuff, especially after his passing now too. And I am kind of a character actor. I do love a good challenge. So anything that's like not like me, I like to say. I like to
Yeah,
say
that's
like my
fair actually.
yeah, I like to say like my acting career is like the multiverse of Andrew. So like American Primeval is very like kind of similar to how it would be in 1857. So it's like that's kind of how I attack my acting career and like characters sometimes, which I just think is fun.
So,
Like I said,
so you
Marvel
sort of
fans.
like
Yeah.
you like taking yourself and seeing what mold you can fit into, you know, sort of how many different as different characters as you possibly can. Like if you see something that you've sort of done a similar thing before, you might take it. Depends like who the character is, but if it's something completely different, that's when you're like, I need that.
Yeah, it's something completely different, like just a challenge, something that's like not me. Like I really do
Yeah,
enjoy like actually becoming somebody else and like starting to get like in the character's like head and like thinking about his thoughts. And at some point, it just like transfers over to real life too. And I start developing like ticks and stuff. I like to call them like that are always like a big tick I had for like American Primeval was like Lucas kind of stutters. He's kind of just like this guy thrown into a chaotic world, like this morally sound kid kind of going into this chaotic dark world. And so like I kind of thought about that. Like I know that like in real life, I sometimes when I'm nervous get a tick or like a stutter, I like to say, or a stutter. And I just kind of brought that into the show too. Because like there was days when I was nervous on set and I was like, you know what, instead of like trying to cover up this nervousness, I think I'm gonna have fun with it and bring it to like bring it up more and like make like
yeah, and
show it.
channel it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and channel it. Because Lucas, I feel like is kind of like in his head and he's very nervous guy. He's always trying to like do what's best for everybody else. He's like kind of like one of the only people like in like kind of like the whole like universe and show that's really like stands for like the good of people. I have like neighbors outside, so I'm sorry if you can hear them.
no, no, I didn't hear anything.
Yeah,
I was
all
going
right.
to say actually, it's funny as well because you know from what you're describing, you must contrast quite a lot to the rest of the characters in the show because, as I understand it, it focuses on a woman and her child, and obviously during the time period that the show is set, it's like a character like yours must have been, you know, a bit of a fish out of water, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's like the first time I ever met with Jai and Pete. Like we kind of had like a sit down when I first got to Albuquerque, and then I drove up to like Santa Fe. I go into the studio, and it's like Pete, and we're in his like big office, and it's like there's Jai Courtney, who I've like watched my whole life growing up, and now he's like talking to me like I'm just like some normal dude who like he wants to share a beer with, and I'm just like, well, this is actually crazy right now. Like I've just watched this guy, now he's like looking at me in real life. Crazy. And like Pete, I grew up watching too, like with Friday Night Lights and Lone Survivor. Like those were some of like the kind of inspirational movies to me. And like kind of flipping that and now being like in this room with these two guys. And it was like really interesting because Pete was like giving like I don't want to say he was like telling Jai. I wasn't telling him at all like what character he was supposed to play, but he was giving him a lot of details like how he thought the character would be. And Jai would have a lot of points to like how what he thought the character would be as well. And they were like having like a really good conversation in that sense. But then Pete kind of looked at me and he turned and he's like, look, I kind of have no idea about the Lucas character. So I'm just going to give him to you and you just create your own
Wow.
character. Yeah. And that's like crazy because I am a green actor. And like, this is my first attempt at like something over like a 200 to $300 million budgeted project. And now I'm
Yeah, I
just
was gonna
like,
say
yeah.
when you
Now
got
he's like,
Netflix on board, that's a big responsibility right there.
yeah. And he's like, yeah, your job now. Like, your job to create this thing. So like I talked to like Mark Smith a lot and like would reach out to Pete every now and then, like tell him my ideas and we just kind of build on that. But a lot of like what you see with Lucas is kind of a lot of like creation of just that came from like my life and pulling from it. So I'm super excited for everyone to see it. Yeah.
Absolutely, it sounds a great character. So, talking more broadly, I suppose now, I suppose this is to a degree more of a personal question. How do you feel about the current film and TV industry? You know, where do you? Because we're obviously living in pretty scary times at the moment. Again, with the strikes that were going on, and then all the AI
Yeah.
stuff that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, it's like how do you perceive the current industry, and where do you see it going? Are you hopeful? Are you a bit nervous? How are you feeling?
I feel a little bit better now than I used to, just because I had the show coming out. And like now I'm gonna have like I guess a little bit of push behind me and like a decent project that I'm in where I can pitch myself a lot to like agents or casting directors and producers and whatnot. And people are going to see like my acting now on like a pretty big scale. That itself is going to be pretty wild. The whole industry itself, I guess, a little bit nervous, but not too nervous. I know we are
Yeah,
kind of like living in. We have all these streaming sites. We have since the pandemic, movie theaters are slowly coming back. We'll see like what happens with movie theaters in the future. But like I know like Sony bought. I'm like ranting right now. I have to like pull it together. And, like I know Sony like bought like Alamo Draft House or something like that, and now Sony's going to exclusively show their movies at Alamo Draft House. And like there's like
yeah.
I think like pros and cons to that. But everything is always changing. It's a constant change, and I think it's just evolving to fit in the industry. And that's kind of like what my dad reminded me too. Is like you always have to be evolving, and you always have to like the industry will change. Like we are living in a day and age where technology does kind of take big steps every so often. Like AI is like the new big thing. I do think we're kind of a few years away from AI taking over acting. So I do feel like I have some time to like really kind of get a name for myself, and I hopefully that will come off in my favor. And like I said, I do feel very optimistic about it. I'm naturally an optimist, but I don't feel too nervous about the industry right now. No.
No, that's good because I think you've also put yourself, as you said yourself, you've put yourself in a great position here. You know, being an American Primeval, it's like I don't doubt that this will lead to so many more avenues. I mean, especially now you've probably got ties and stuff and connections. You know, it's like it'll
Yeah.
probably serve you amazingly.
Yeah, it's crazy just casually knowing people now. Like it's like
Yeah,
oh yeah. Like I can just like text Jai Courtney or Taylor Kitsch if I wanted to. Like I it's just a weird thought to have. But yeah.
nah, it's wild. But again, obviously we have student pages, so we have a lot of students reading
Yeah.
our stuff online and you know in the magazines and stuff. So I think you know that in mind, you obviously work as you said. What did you say your job was on the side again?
Ooh, I up until like 2 weeks ago I had like two jobs. Borderline three.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just because it is very kind of expensive to be an actor who's a kind of like on the up. Like they like the whole industry doesn't really care if I don't have money. Like, they still get the world's
Yeah,
gonna move no matter what. So I just
yep,
got to figure it out. So yeah, I did
yeah,
start. I picked up a bunch of jobs, and like I was working as a tour guide in Austin, riding a little like riding e-bikes around Austin for the longest time. Worked at like a warehouse for a little bit, like during like night, like just doing night shifts if I need some spare money. But mainly it's yeah, like I said, it's like just like a restaurant right now that I'm serving at, and it is
yeah.
like it's starting to get like harder working there because like I do have just all of this stuff on my mind all the time. And I feel like I'm constantly like running to the bathroom every 15 minutes there to like check my phone and check for emails, texts, because I know it's just happening right now. I need to be like on edge. But I also need to be working and making money so I can like do all this. It's like a very
Yeah.
weird balance. And hopefully at some point soon, I don't have to be balancing this hard anymore. Uh,
It's not far away. It's not far away, believe me.
but
No,
also,
I was what I was going to say is
yeah,
so for students that want to do what you're doing, where you're sort of progressing from you know, sort of the standard sort of jobs into this huge industry. So you're saying that you would suggest sort of trying to balance that, you know, hopes versus, you know, like having a backbone to fall back on, if you know what I mean. It's sort of
yeah,
like trying to, you know, balance the aspects of your life, you'd say.
yeah. For me, it's not even a backbone. Like it's still like I'm still broke. Like I get my paycheck and it just goes right back into acting. Like right now, I have like photo shoots and photos I have to pay for, and I have to go like afford trips to like LA and New York during all this time. But like I don't really have that money, so it's kind of like how do I
Yeah.
do it? And in order to get that money, I need to work. So it's like a weird balance of like, I have to look into the future, like a month in the future, and be like, all right, I'm gonna take this day off, this day off, this day off, and
Yeah.
like make those my days I can like really focus acting. But what I would say to like people that are just like aspiring actors or are just grinding away too is just what I tell like all my friends who are in the industry is one day at a time. I always say just make sure to try to do one thing towards acting a day. If that's reading a script, if that's even watching a movie, if that's sending a few emails, if that's changing a photo on just one profile on some acting site. Like one thing a day, I feel like if you just do one thing a day, after a few days, it starts to become a few things. And then after like a few weeks, it's now many things. Then after a month or two, it's now this whole thing. And now you have a lot of stuff that you've done. And it is just about not stopping. Like you can't stop. It has to be just a constant go. Like it has to be you're just a train going nonstop. Because
Yeah,
if you do
because like you
stop,
mentioned earlier, they won't
yeah,
stop for you. You have to
yeah.
catch up to them.
And you have to remember there's millions of actors out there too.
Yeah.
And there are hungry actors and there are people that are putting their best foot forward every single day. And you have to be doing that too, because if you don't, you're gonna fall behind. It is
Yeah.
competitive
No,
and it is
absolutely.
the way it is. That's the way of the industry. And if you don't put your best foot forward every day, someone else will. And that's
Yeah.
like I said, my dad reminded me of that too. Like it's I sound like my dad right now when I talk, which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Oh no, it's wonderful. I mean, you said about obviously like always keeping on top of your, acting pages and stuff, making sure so they're well presented and things. So to what degree would you sort of say that social media plays a part in, getting these roles? Not necessarily social media, but all the things like, IMDb, stuff like that, to what degree would you say they help you get your name out there?
I've never been a big social media person. Like I booked this with like 900 followers on Instagram. So like that was never like a thing for me. Like social media is becoming more of a thing now because it is like I know I'm gonna have a push at some point. I know I'm gonna have these followers and like now like my whole team's like, what do we do now with that? Like
Yeah.
what type of way do we push myself? Like and like how are we gonna present myself to the world? And it's like a whole talk.
Because it's funny you've mentioned that actually, because I am a firm believer that, I don't think that any actor or person in the public image sort of has any obligation to have a social media page. If
Yeah.
again, if you're asking me personally, it's like I think you have a right to privacy. It's like if you don't want
Yeah.
all that, there's other ways to get your name out there. It's just I suppose a
Yeah.
lot of people do consider going immediately down the social media avenue, but I just does it have to be that way? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Maybe at some point, yes. Like if you want to get into like a bigger market, like the Disney market or something like that, yeah, sure, it might.
Oh yeah.
You might need those followers at that point. On the other end too, like we talked, you said like IMDb, Actors Access. I think that might actually be very important. I like just because that's the industry. Like my Actors Access, that's like the biggest thing I'm always making sure is up to date. Because that's kind of like
Yeah.
I'll print out my resume from there too, just because it looks so damn good. Yeah, but yeah, just like it's really cool to see like from like when I first started, like what it used to be, and now like I have a photo of what it used to be to like what it is now, and it's like pretty
Yeah.
crazy. That's like
Print
it
out the new
actually,
one,
yeah,
show them. It's like, guys, you see that big red N on there? Guess who that is?
yeah, which is crazy too. It's like a crazy. This is just me just being a normal guy, like dude from Michigan. That was the craziest thing is when I started to get like the Netflix N in my email. I was like, all right, this is really cool. Like this is
That's
wild right
wild.
now. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So again, obviously, all professions have challenges to some degree, but I would actually argue that again, acting in anything, whether it be a TV show, film, there's so much scrutiny that comes from the public with them. You have things like Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, where you know, people do have the
yeah.
opportunity where they take your work and everyone feels like they have an ability to voice it, which obviously with so many professions that isn't the case. So, do you, again, more of a personal one, do you personally feel any pressure from sort of the reviews that might come in or anything like that? Or do you more focus on what you have done and, the
Uh,
skills that you have put toward it? Which is more important if you had to weigh them up?
Well, I think actors that say they don't care about the reviews are liars. Like, I just think that's a big fat lie. I think we all kind of do. Like, as humans, we do want acceptance and recognition, and we want people to tell us that we're doing good at stuff. Like, it just feels good. So, yeah, I do think it's kind of a lie when actors say that because, yeah, I am
Yeah.
nervous about that stuff. I think there is. I don't want to say there's a good chance. I think it's. I do think I did pretty good, pretty well in this production that's going to come out. But I do think there's a small sliver that I might be like in my bed at some point, crying in a corner. Like I think that could be a thing. Like it's a very real. It's a very real thing. But I did work really hard in all of this for the last 6 years, and like I've trained my butt off, and like kind of went like crazy scientist actor mode, like with my acting, and a big
Yeah.
melting pot. And I do think it's a very good thing. So I am pretty optimistic when it comes to this stuff. Like, yeah, I do have doubts, like everybody does every now and then. Saying like, yeah, maybe I did sucked during all this. Like maybe it was that way. But then I realized that I also had my character built up a lot in the show. And that was not just done like over one night. That was like the whole shoot. It was like I was just
Oh
being
yeah.
thrown scenes, and the more I actually remember that, the more it's kind of like, all right, you did good enough that they wanted you in more scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I doubt you have anything to worry about, to be honest. As I say, I watched the trailer for American Primeval. I've seen stills from it. The set design is out of this world and stuff. And
insane.
again,
Yeah.
it's got some huge names in there. I think I only sort of skimmed the actor list, but I swear Dane DeHaan was in there.
That's one of the biggest ones. Yeah, that was like my kind of like wow, because like I'm just like I said, like I've brought up like Marvel and like DC and superheroes and stuff. I am kind of like a superhero nerd. So
Yeah, because
I
he was
the Green
Goblin,
Go
wasn't he,
yeah,
in
he was
one
the
of the
Green Goblin and, like,
Spider-Man? Yeah,
and the Andrew
yeah.
Garfield ones. Yeah, and so like I remember watching him, and he was also the kid from Chronicle.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and so like showing up and like seeing or just like seeing originally that he was cast in this too, and then like opening up the script and then being like, whoa, my character like might come in contact with this guy. I would go too into depth with anything with the script. Like it was very cool to like meet him and like shake his hand and kind of say like, yo, man, like I grew up watching you. And now it's like I'm talking to you one on one. And that's like he like looked at me, he's like, isn't that what it's all about then? And I was like, yeah, it is. It was like a very good response. And like he did like build me up on set, which is really cool. And kind of like tell me like my acting was helping his acting because like I was telling him how his acting was like just making it so much easier for me. But yeah, it was kind of just crazy to have that experience and to like have like an actor I've looked up to my whole life kind of just now be like sitting right next to me in a scene. Crazy.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know, because I
crazy.
suppose at that point it's like you've always held this person on a pedestal, and then suddenly within a second you're like in the same place, same time, same responsibilities to a degree. It's like that must be a crazy experience to go through.
Oh yeah,
Um,
from like a movie
but
fan
yes,
too. Yeah, like a big film
yeah.
fan just growing up. Like there's a term like imposter syndrome. I felt that
Oh
for a
yeah.
bit. Yeah, it was definitely I felt that for a bit, but it did go away at some point too. And I just like yeah, that was like the cast and the crew just being so amazing. Like I was a green actor, which is kind of term wise, just like industry wise, that just means like it's my first ever production, like my first ever role. Like it wasn't my first ever production, but role with such on the scale of what it was,
Yeah.
and like character, like how big the character was in this production. So yeah, like I was like this green actor. Everyone kind of like took me under their wing, especially Jai, the guy like plays my brother. He like actually did kind of it felt like he was like a big brother to me, like on set. And like he would be like very stern with me too, like kind of like how a big brother is. And he'd kind of like trash talk me some days and like make me feel like a little brother. And I was doing it back to him, and I was just annoying him as much as I possibly could. And it was like a very fun little dynamic we had going on. It was awesome. The whole cast and crew like kind of take me under their wing was cool.
Oh, that's very sweet. So we've obviously spoken about a lot of the actors that have looked up to and grew up with and stuff. But is there any actor that you've sort of seen you say I really would love to work on something with them? So set aside like people you've looked up to all the time. Is there sort of been a performer where you've specifically watched something and
Yeah.
gone, that is someone I would love to work with?
Yeah, there's one that comes into mind. It's like kind of like the whole reason why I started acting in the first place, where I got the love for it. I remember when I was 12 years old, I was with my mom. We went to my godmother's house just for like the night. They had some party they had to go to. And there was like my buddy Chris. They're like, we called him Cousin Chris growing up, and he's just a very close family friend. But like, yeah, Cousin Chris was there. And he basically like put on this movie with Tom Hanks in it. It was by the name of Forrest Gump. And I kid you not, I watched that movie 4 times in a row that night
Wow.
and like just fell in love from that moment on. And like even still to this day, like there's like months throughout the year that Tom Hanks, when he's sitting on the bench as Forrest Gump, that's my background on my phone because that's like that movie just meant so much to me. I've seen it probably close to 1,000 times, and I can still sit there and just
Wow.
watch it without looking at my phone. Just it's just one of those movies for me. Like everybody has those movies. They have those feel good movies. They're like,
Absolutely.
yeah, and
And
that's kind
Forrest
of what
Gump's
it
a
is.
great film for that to be your movie as well. I mean, what a movie.
Yeah, so Tom Hanks is the answer to that question. Yeah,
Yeah.
very. And I know they're making like a Tom Hanks 2 now, or not Tom Hanks 2, Tom Hanks 2. They're making a Forrest Gump 2, I think I heard, and I'm like, that's pretty crazy. It's like about his
Really?
son. Yeah, I heard like
I
a
didn't
rumor.
even
I don't know
know
if
that.
this is true, but I've like, seen some stuff, and like there's been some like talk. I'll get my work about it, and I'm
Oh
like, it's like
wow.
Timothy Chalamet's famous son, and I'm like, it's indie slapper because I'm like, they would have waited like 4 months.
I mean, it has
And
recently been the era of doing sequels to like decade-old films. So, I mean, we've had what Beetlejuice 2.
yeah, Beetlejuice too.
There was loads of them.
Michael Keaton's probably another actor that I would really want to work with at some point.
Oh, he's great. He's
I
great.
think he's like absolutely insane. I think Keira Knightley's insane. I think trying to think of more. I'm trying to think of like younger actors right now that I think are like super duper talented that I would just like to have like a swing. Like Timothy Chalamet would be awesome to work with, just because I
Oh yeah.
always like Meisner too, and it'd be fun just to like do Meisner with him. But yeah, I was just more so just like actors I grew up watching. Like Adam Sandler's another one. Like I grew up watching just like Happy Gilmore, The Waterboy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Grown Ups too. Those are always like such like funny movies to me, and I just loved Adam Sandler growing up. So Adam Sandler kind of reminds me of like my dad's sense of humor too. So it'd just be like really cool to like work with a lot of like the actors that kind of like formed my love for the craft.
I like that you have very sentimental reasons for the things that you do and the people you look up to. I think that's something to really respect. So I've got two last questions here, and
Yeah.
these are very open-ended ones, but they're things that I was just generally more curious about than anything.
Okay.
So for you personally, right, if you could envision a role on a set, what would it be for you? Like, I know I'm asking a lot of you right now, but if you could place yourself in any role, any set, what sort of thing would you want to go for?
There's two answers to this because like when I was on set, I've always like kind of wanted to play a superhero, and the name Logan in my name. And I don't know if you saw my look. And the thing I was getting the whole time was just skinny Wolverine over and over and over to the point that people were like, "You should get your agents on board with this." And I was like, it's a role that I'd be terrified to take, but it'd be super fun to take regardless. Just because I know there's like such a harsh fan base right there. If you don't do a good job, they will let you know.
Oh
And
yeah,
like I just
yeah.
know like how loved Hugh is for Wolverine. That's like
You
that's
should
a
have got
part.
yourself a cameo in the new one. There was loads of Wolverines.
Oh, I know they've been really cool, but still, who am I to that point? Like it
Ah, yeah.
come January, yeah. Now, if personally, like a role that I've always thought would be really cool is like just any type of like World War II feature. I think would just be awesome, or like series that I could be in. Like I said, I grew up watching the show Combat 2 with my dad, and so like that kind of like went hand in hand. I played Army man, like Army growing up all the time. So like doing something along the lines of like World War II, just any kind of like period war piece would be like awesome to do just because I just have that little boy in me. It still loves to run around with like a stick, pretending it's like a bit of gun. Yeah, just like running around with like my imagination and playing just like, yeah, Army man growing up as a kid. Like I'm kind of just like a big kid. And like now I get to like play make believe for a living, which is really cool.
I mean, that's what
So
acting is, right? That's what
yeah.
acting
So
is.
like it's really cool. I get to do that. It's kind of like I'm just like
Yeah.
20 years later doing this now. Yeah.
So yeah, sort of Wolverine, World War II. Any talent scouts, keep your ears out. So last one, out of everything you've done in your career so far, what would you say is your proudest achievement? This could be like a role, something you've landed, or something you've maybe done on set. What would you say is the thing you have done in your overall career that you are most proud of?
So this is gonna go back to like me being like sentimental again. Kind of just like talking about my family. The thing about like my dad is that he was definitely afraid of airplanes. Like I think like he went on the honeymoon with my mom, and during his honeymoon, like two of the engines on the plane went out and started to like look kind of bad during that flight. But they did an emergency landing. Everyone was fine. Yeah, it was okay. But it shook him, and so like he never got on a plane ever again. That was before me
Wow.
too. I did this like really kind of like silly horror film, like short film that was called Beware, where I just played some like Chad type of frat guy who like wants to become a werewolf. And it, like the production was really good. It turned into like a really cool project, and like it did really well, like at festivals and stuff. But I just remember like my dad got on an airplane and came down to Austin, Texas, on an airplane for the first time for like 28 years or 25 years at that
Oh
point
wow.
to come see me be in a 10-minute short film. And I guess that was kind of like a very good, like, all right, like
Yeah.
he's doing it, and like I don't know, it was just making him proud too is always a big thing. Like, it does kind of go back to that. Like, I'm very like kind of a simple man, I guess, to that extent.
No. I
Yeah,
think
but
that, as I said before, I think the fact that you hold this stuff so near and dear to you, and that that is what drives you. I think it's something to be looked up to. I think it's such an amazing motive to have in life.
yeah, and I guess I'm really proud of just how I respond to a lot of the bad things in my life too. A lot of times, like in those moments where you're having a very bad day, you kind of want to roll over. You want to go back to bed. I don't know. I just, like I said, always remembered what my parents would tell me, and it was just you have to roll out of bed on those days in particular. You have to. If you just let that rule you, you're not going to get anywhere. You actually want to go. I just was kind of proud of doing that, and like people noticing it. Like a lot of people that was close to like noticed me like respond like when my dad passed in a very good way, and like they kind of like told me it was very inspiring. And now I have a lot of people coming up to me saying like I'm inspiring you, and it does scare me to an extent too. Like I'm going to be very honest about that. Like it does make me absolutely like terrified some days. Like some nights there's the other side of me that's like it is pretty cool that I do get to have these people that are, I don't know, almost inspired by what I'm doing. And like if I get to actually like people are taking what I'm doing and using it for inspiration in their lives, like their own lives, to go do good things and like great things to make the world better. Yeah,
Yes.
there's the answer.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. So yeah, I mean that is all we've got for now. But so yeah, American Primeval out in January, I believe, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
January 9th.
Amazing. So yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like an amazing project. You've been absolutely great. Thank you ever so much for how much you've shared with us as well. It's been incredible to hear about. You've such an amazing story to tell, And I'm really glad that we've got these answers out of you. I'm hoping this does well for our analytics when you'll no doubt, absolutely massive in a few months' time. People come to this interview. We're the first ones to have you on. It'll be great
Yeah,
for us.
first interview. This is it. Yeah, it's my first one. Which thank you again for doing it. Like it feels awesome having people
No,
on. Actually come talk to me.
absolutely. No. Pleasure is all ours.